Welcome back to the Technology Risk Podcast. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Music so you never miss an episode. Today we're tackling backup and disaster recovery, or BDR for short. BDR is something that can keep any business owner up at night. We put together an outline based on some really alarming statistics, especially for small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah. You know that sinking feeling when you realize you might have just permanently deleted an important file? Well, multiply that by 1,000, and that's what we're dealing with here. The National Archives and Records Administration found that 93% of businesses that don't have a disaster recovery plan and then suffer a major data disaster, they end up closing within 1 year.
Wow, that's not just a statistic, that's a survival rate.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize that BDR planning isn't just about tech. It's about the very lifeblood of a business.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of businesses, they get caught up in the day-to-day and relegate BDR to the we'll deal with it later pile, but the reality is later might be too late.
Right. And when we talk about disasters, it's easy to jump to the big Hollywood-level stuff like massive cyber attacks, earthquakes, floods. But we need to remember that even simple human error can be just as devastating.
Absolutely. Veritas research shows that human error actually accounts for between 10 and 50% of data loss incidents. It's a huge range, and it really highlights that no matter how tech-savvy your team is, accidents happen.
I mean, think about it. Someone accidentally empties the recycle bin or saves over the wrong file version or even misplaces a storage device. I mean, these are things we've all done at some point. But in a business context, the consequences can be huge.
And let's not forget about the increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks out there. Ransomware in particular is a major threat these days. It's not just about the financial hit of the ransom itself, but the downtime, the potential data, loss of damage to your reputation, all of that.
There was that story about a small law firm that had to pay $75,000 in ransom because they just weren't prepared. It nearly crippled them. A solid backup strategy could have saved them a fortune, not to mention all the stress and uncertainty that they went through.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Investing in BDR is essentially investing in your peace of mind.
Speaking of investing, there are also legal and compliance aspects to consider as well. Regulations like GDPR, APEA, and PCI DSS, they all mandate data protection and recovery plans, depending on your industry. The fines for non-compliance, they could be significant.
Yeah, you're right. Protecting data isn't just good business practice. It's often a legal obligation as well. But let's step back for a moment and talk about the different types of backup solutions that are out there. We've got on-premises, we've got cloud, and then we've got hybrid, each with its own pros and cons.
Okay, let's break those down a little bit. What exactly are on-premises backups?
So on-premises backups involve storing your data locally, like on external hard drives or servers that are physically located within your business. The good thing about this is you have quick access to your backups and full control over your data. There's no reliance on internet speeds or third-party providers.
It sounds pretty straightforward. But I imagine there are some downsides as well, right?
Yeah, the big one is vulnerability. A fire, a flood, even theft can wipe out your backups in an instant. Just imagine a manufacturing business that loses everything in a fire because their backups were all on-site and not redundant.
That brings us to cloud backups, which seem to be all the rage these days.
For good reason, cloud backups are stored on remote servers that are managed by third-party providers. So they're generally safe from physical disasters, they're scalable, you can access them from anywhere with an internet connection, and they're very resilient.
So no more worrying about those fires or floods. But I imagine there are concerns about cloud backups as well, right? I mean, things like security and privacy.
Yeah, those are valid concerns. You're relying on a third-party provider to protect your data, so you need to be really comfortable with their security measures. And then there's also the reliance on the internet. If your connection goes down, you lose access to your backups.
It's always about finding the right balance. That's where hybrid backups come in, right? Combining the best of both worlds.
Precisely. Hybrid backups, they combine on-premises and cloud solutions. So you get the speed and control of local backups for your frequently used data and the off-site security of the cloud for disaster recovery.
It sounds ideal. But are there any drawbacks to hybrid backups?
Well, they can be a bit more complex to set up and manage initially. But a logistics company we studied saw a 50% reduction in downtime after switching to a hybrid model. The initial investment in the setup and management can lead to significant long-term gains.
That's compelling. So we've established that BDR is essential. We've explored the different approaches to backups. But what about actually creating a solid disaster recovery plan? That's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Absolutely. A plan is only as good as its execution. So the first step is identifying your critical assets. These are the systems, the applications, of the data that are absolutely essential to your operations. We're talking about things like your customer database, your financial software, your email server, the things you can't function without.
I imagine prioritizing recovery of these assets is also key, right? So how do businesses determine which systems need to be back up and running first?
This is where we dive into RTOs and RPOs, recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives. An RTO is basically the maximum amount of time that you can afford to have a system down before it starts to really impact your business. And an RPO is the maximum amount of data you can afford to lose.
Okay, let's make this a little bit more concrete. Imagine you're a retail business that relies heavily on online orders. What might your RTO and RPO look like in that scenario?
Well, your e-commerce platform would be considered a critical asset, right? Because every minute it's down, you're losing potential sales and customer trust. So you might set a very aggressive RTO of just a few hours, aiming to get back online as quickly as possible.
That makes sense. And what about the RPO for, let's say, your customer database?
Well, customer data is incredibly valuable, and losing even a small portion of it could have some significant repercussions. So you might set a very tight RPO of, say, 24 hours, meaning that you aim to lose no more than a day's worth of data in a worst-case scenario.
So essentially, you're determining your risk tolerance for both downtime and data loss.
Exactly. Once you've identified your critical assets and you've set your RTOs and RPOs, you need to develop backup strategies that are tailored to those objectives. This is where decisions about backup frequency and type come into play.
Right, we talked about different backup types earlier. Full incremental differential.
Right.
How do those fit into developing a backup strategy?
So a full backup is like taking a snapshot of your entire system. It's very comprehensive, but it can be quite time-consuming. Incremental backups, they're much faster because they only copy the data that's changed since the last backup, whereas differential backups copy the data that's changed since the last full backup.
So you're choosing the right backup type based on how much data you can afford to lose and how quickly you need to recover.
Exactly. And there's also the 3-2-1 rule, which we briefly mentioned earlier. This rule basically suggests having 3 copies of your data on 2 different storage mediums with 1 copy stored offsite.
So that could mean having 1 copy on your local server, another on an external hard drive, and then a 3rd copy in the cloud.
That's one approach. The key is to avoid putting all of your eggs in one basket.
Multiple backups, multiple locations. That sounds like a recipe for peace of mind.
Oh.
But we need to remember that even the best backup strategy is useless if it's not consistently executed.
Right, and that's where automation comes in. I mean, it's not really realistic to expect someone to manually back up data every single day. But there's some great software out there that can handle this automatically, so you're minimizing the risk of human error.
Setting it and forgetting it. That sounds ideal. What else should we consider when we're creating this disaster recovery plan?
Well, documentation is crucial. You need a clear roadmap that outlines roles, responsibilities, step-by-step instructions for data recovery, for communication, for system restoration. Think of it as a playbook for when disaster strikes.
So if a cyber attack hits, everyone knows exactly who to contact, what steps to take, and how to get systems back online.
Exactly. This eliminates confusion and helps ensure a smooth recovery process. And don't forget about securing your backup data itself. We're talking strong passwords, multi-factor authentication encryption, all the usual suspects for data protection apply to backups as well.
Of course, because what good is a backup if it falls into the wrong hands? Speaking of good backups, the final piece of the puzzle is testing and updating our plan regularly.
Absolutely. Creating a plan is just the first step. Testing it is how you find the weaknesses, you refine your procedures, and ensure that it's actually going to work when you need it the most.
So how do we go about testing a disaster recovery plan? Are we simulating floods and cyber attacks in the office?
Hopefully not. We can start with what are called tabletop exercises. These are essentially discussions of disaster scenarios. So imagine you and your team sitting around a table brainstorming what you would do if your primary server crashed.
Just walking through the plan step by step and identifying any potential issues that could come up. That makes sense. Are there other ways to test a plan?
Yeah, there are full-scale drills where you actually try to restore systems from your backups. This gives you a real-world sense of how long it takes to recover and where the bottlenecks might be. And then there are partial tests where you focus on specific systems or backup locations, like restoring just your email server from the cloud.
So a range of options depending on your resources and how in-depth you need to test. How often should businesses be testing their plans?
At least quarterly to make sure everything is current and functional. And any time after any major change to your technology, your processes, or your team, a disaster recovery plan is a living document. It needs to adapt as your business does.
Speaking of adapting, do you have any real-world stories that illustrate why all of this is so important?
Definitely. Let's start with a positive one. A regional accounting firm we worked with was hit by a ransomware attack. Fortunately, they had invested in cloud backups and they had actually tested their plan. So they were able to restore operations within hours using their cloud backups.
So they dodged a bullet.
They dodged a cannonball, they saved over $100,000 in potential ransom payments, and they got back to business with minimal disruption.
It's a reminder that preparation is key. But sadly, not every story has a happy ending.
Right. There was a small retail chain that wasn't as fortunate. They didn't have offsite backups, and a flood wiped out their servers. No customer data, no inventory records, nothing. They were forced to close their doors within 6 months.
That's tragic. It really underscores the importance of redundancy and offsite backups.
It's a harsh reminder that disaster doesn't discriminate.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from types of backups and disaster recovery plans to real-world stories that illustrate the impact of preparedness or the lack thereof. But I feel like we've only scratched the surface. What are some of the emerging trends in this area that we should be aware of?
Let's dive into that in the next part. Stay tuned. We talked about that retail chain that was wiped out by the flood. It's a stark reminder that the nature of business risk, it's fundamentally changed.
Yeah, in the past, companies, they primarily worried about physical threats, right? But now it's all about cybersecurity and data protection.
It's a whole different ballgame. Physical threats, they're tangible, you can see them coming. But digital threats, they're insidious. They're often lurking unseen until it's too late.
Right, we can install security cameras, we can have alarm systems. But protecting data in the digital age, it requires a completely different approach.
Exactly. It's about firewalls, intrusion detection systems, data encryption, and creating a culture of security within your organization.
So it's not just about technology, it's about people and processes as well. It's a multi-layered approach, just like with physical security.
Absolutely. You need multiple layers of defense to create a truly resilient security posture.
And just like with physical security, you can't just set it and forget it. The threat landscape is constantly changing. New vulnerabilities are being discovered all the time. New attack methods, they emerge.
Which is why staying informed about the latest threats and vulnerabilities is absolutely critical. That's where things like threat intelligence and vulnerability assessments, they come in.
They help you understand where your weaknesses are and prioritize your security efforts.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process, but it's essential for any business that wants to not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of cybersecurity in the context of BDR, but let's get a little bit more practical here. What are some of the specific tools and technologies that businesses can actually use to implement their backup and recovery plans?
Well, there's a wide range of options available, and the best choice for a particular business is really going to depend on their specific needs and their budget. But let's start by talking about backup software.
Okay, so what are some of the key features to look for when you're choosing backup software?
Well, reliability, that's paramount. You need software that's going to consistently back up your data without fail. Imagine setting up your backups only to find out that they haven't been running for the past month. That's a recipe for disaster.
So reliability above all else. What about ease of use? A lot of business owners aren't necessarily tech experts.
Absolutely. The last thing you want is software that's so complicated that it requires a dedicated IT team to manage. You need something that's intuitive and user-friendly, even for those who aren't particularly tech-savvy.
And what about backup options? There are so many different ways to back up data these days.
Right. You need software that offers a variety of backup options. We're talking full backups, incremental backups, differential backups. Backups to the cloud, to a local device, or both. The right choice is going to depend on your specific needs and your resources.
Can you remind us again about the difference between full, incremental, and differential backups?
Sure. A full backup that copies everything. It's like taking a snapshot of your entire system at that particular moment. Incremental backups, they only copy the data that has changed since the last backup. And then differential backups, they copy the data that's changed since the last full backup.
So incremental backups, they're generally faster than full backups.
Yeah.
But they require more steps to restore the data.
Right.
Because you need the last full backup plus all of the subsequent incremental backups.
Exactly. And differential backups, they kind of fall somewhere in between. They're faster than full backups, but they're a little bit slower than incremental backups. And restoration, it requires the last full backup plus the latest differential backup.
So it's a trade-off between speed and complexity.
Right. You need to choose the right backup strategy based on your RTOs, your RPOs, and your available resources.
What other factors should businesses consider when they're selecting backup software?
Well, security is crucial. You want software that uses strong encryption to protect your data both in transit and at rest. After all, what good is a backup if it's just as vulnerable as your primary data?
That's a great point. What about things like scheduling and automation?
Those are essential features too. You want to be able to schedule your backups to run automatically at specific times, and you want to be able to automate the process of verifying those backups so you don't have to manually check them every single time.
So making backups as painless and as hands-off as possible.
Exactly. And then there are features like reporting and monitoring. Can you easily generate reports on your backup status? Can you monitor your backups in real time to make sure everything is working as expected? Visibility and control, they're really key here.
It sounds like choosing the right backup software can be a pretty complex decision.
It can be, but taking the time to carefully evaluate your options and choose software that meets your specific needs is well worth the effort.
We've talked a lot about backups, but what about disaster recovery tools? What are some of the options that are available to businesses?
One popular option is cloud-based disaster recovery. This involves replicating your entire IT infrastructure in the cloud. So if your primary systems go down, you can fail over to the cloud and continue operating with minimal disruption.
So it's like having a spare tire for your entire IT infrastructure.
Exactly. And the beauty of cloud-based disaster recovery is that it's very scalable and it's affordable. You only
Wow.
pay for what you use, and you can easily spin up new resources as needed.
That's great, but what if you have certain applications or data that can't be moved to the cloud?
Well, that's where hybrid disaster recovery comes in. With a hybrid approach, you can replicate some of your systems in the cloud while keeping others on premises.
So you're essentially choosing the best of both worlds based on your specific needs.
Exactly. And then there are more traditional disaster recovery solutions, like having a secondary data center that you can fail over to in case of an emergency.
So basically having a duplicate of your entire IT infrastructure in a separate physical location.
Right. But that can be a very expensive option, especially for small businesses.
Makes sense. So we've got cloud-based disaster recovery, hybrid disaster recovery, and traditional data centers. Are there any other options out there?
There's also disaster recovery as a service, or DRS. This involves outsourcing your disaster recovery to a third-party provider. They provide the infrastructure, the software, and the expertise to manage your disaster recovery plan.
So it's like having a disaster recovery team on call 247.
Exactly. It can be a great option for businesses that don't have the resources or the expertise to manage their own disaster recovery in-house.
That sounds pretty appealing, but I imagine it probably comes with a pretty hefty price tag as well.
It can be more expensive than managing disaster recovery yourself, but for many businesses, the peace of mind and the reduced risk are well worth the cost.
So we've got a lot of different options to choose from. How do businesses know which solution is right for them?
Well, it depends on a number of factors, including your budget, your recovery time objectives, your recovery point objectives, and your tolerance for risk.
So it's kind of a balancing act.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, so it's important to carefully assess your needs and choose a solution that meets your specific requirements.
And if you're not sure where to start, it's always a good idea to consult with an expert.
Definitely, a qualified IT consultant can help you assess your risks, develop a disaster recovery plan, and choose the right tools and technologies for your business.
You know, it's interesting to think about how the role of IT has changed over the years. It used to be that IT was seen as a cost center, but now it's really become a strategic asset.
I completely agree. IT is no longer just about keeping the lights on. It's about driving innovation, improving efficiency, and enabling businesses to compete in the digital economy.
And that's why investing in things like backup and disaster recovery is so important. It's not just about protecting your data, it's about protecting your business.
Exactly. A robust BDR plan is essential for business continuity and resilience.
It's about making sure that your business can weather any storm, whether it's a natural disaster, a cyber attack, or even just a simple hardware failure.
And it's about having the peace of mind, knowing that you're prepared for whatever comes your way.
So we've talked about the importance of BDR, the different types of backup solutions, the steps for creating a disaster recovery plan, the tools and technologies that businesses can use, and the evolving role of IT. It's been a very comprehensive discussion.
We've covered a lot of ground, but before we wrap up, I want to emphasize a few key takeaways.
Absolutely. What are the most important things that you want to leave our listeners with today?
First and foremost, I want to stress that backup and disaster recovery is not just for large enterprises. It's essential for businesses of all sizes.
Especially small and medium-sized businesses. They're often even more vulnerable to data loss and downtime than larger businesses because they might not have the same resources or expertise to recover.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to have a plan in place. Don't wait until disaster strikes to start thinking about backup and disaster recovery.
Be proactive, not reactive.
Right, and make backup and disaster recovery a part of your overall business strategy, not just an afterthought.
So it's about making it a priority.
Absolutely, and recognizing that investing in backup and disaster recovery is ultimately an investment in your business's future.
Well said. So to wrap up this episode of the Technology Risk Podcast, let's shift gears a little bit and look ahead at some of the emerging trends that are shaping the future of BDR.
Yeah, the landscape is constantly evolving. There are some exciting developments on the horizon. One of the most promising areas, I think, is the use of AI and automation.
That sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
How will AI impact backup and disaster recovery?
Well, imagine predictive analytics that can actually identify potential failures before they even occur. AI algorithms can analyze vast amounts of data from your systems to detect patterns and anomalies that might indicate an impending hardware failure or a cyber attack.
That's incredible. It's like having a crystal ball for your IT infrastructure.
Precisely. With AI-powered predictive analytics, you can move from a reactive approach to a proactive one, addressing potential issues before they even turn into major disasters.
That would be a game changer for businesses. What other trends are you seeing out there?
Well, we're also witnessing a pretty significant shift towards what are called cloud-native solutions. As businesses increasingly rely on cloud platforms for their operations, it makes sense to leverage the cloud's capabilities for backup and disaster recovery as well.
So we're talking about faster recovery times, increased scalability, and potentially even lower costs.
Exactly. Cloud-native BDR solutions are specifically designed to seamlessly integrate with cloud environments, making it easier and more efficient to protect your data.
What about the integration of cybersecurity with BDR? Are we seeing more unified solutions that address both data protection and recovery?
Absolutely. It's becoming increasingly clear that data protection and recovery, they're really two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. So we're seeing more vendors offering integrated solutions that combine the best of both worlds.
That makes sense. A more holistic approach to data security.
Right. And then there's continuous data protection, or CDP. This is the technology that actually provides real-time backups, minimizing data loss to mere seconds.
So backing up your data every few seconds? That sounds like overkill?
It might sound that way, but for businesses that absolutely cannot afford any data loss whatsoever, CDP can be a lifesaver. Think about financial institutions, healthcare providers, or e-commerce companies that are processing, thousands of transactions per minute. Every second of downtime can result in significant financial losses or even compliance violations.
So CDP is all about minimizing that RPO to the absolute minimum.
Precisely. It's the ultimate insurance policy against data loss.
It sounds like the future of BDR is going to be very exciting. With advancements in AI, cloud computing, and continuous data protection, businesses are going to have more options than ever before to protect their data and ensure business continuity.
It is a rapidly evolving landscape, but one thing remains constant, and that's the importance of preparedness. The businesses that prioritize BDR and stay ahead of the curve, they're going to be the ones that thrive in the years to come.
So what can small and medium-sized businesses do today to start preparing for the future of BDR?
Well, first and foremost, they need to assess their current backup and recovery practices. Identify any gaps or weaknesses and develop a plan to address them.
And then?
Choose the right backup solution, one that fits their needs, their budget, and their compliance requirements. It's really essential to select a solution that can scale and adapt as their business grows.
And once they have a solution in place?
They need to develop and document a comprehensive recovery plan. This plan should outline the steps for recovering from different types of disasters, including natural disasters, cyber attacks, and hardware failures.
So a detailed playbook for every possible scenario.
Exactly. And don't forget to test the plan regularly to make sure it's up to date and effective.
Testing is key. It's the only way to know for sure that your plan is going to work when you need it the most.
And finally, educate your staff on their role and responsibilities during recovery efforts. Make sure everyone knows what to do in case of an emergency.
So communication and training are essential.
Absolutely. A well-informed and prepared team is your best defense against any disaster.
I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about backup and disaster recovery. From the basics to the latest trends, we've explored the importance of BDR, the different types of backup solutions, the steps for creating a disaster recovery plan, and the tools and technologies that businesses can use. We've also shared some real-world stories, I think, that highlight the importance of preparedness.
And we discussed the exciting future of BDR. With advancements in AI, cloud computing, and continuous data protection, businesses have more options than ever to protect their data and ensure their continuity.
It's been a really comprehensive discussion, and we hope our listeners found it informative and insightful.
If you're a business owner or an IT professional, we urge you to take BDR seriously. It's not a matter of if disaster will strike, but when.
Don't wait until it's too late. Invest in BDR today to protect your business for tomorrow.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Technology Risk Podcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Music for more insights on managing technology risks.